Much for those kind words. It truly is my pleasure to be here tonight. I have to admit I feel a little guilty because sometimes when you're a man with breast cancer, you're a little bit in demand. And I just feel that in some senses that's a little unfair because, oh yes, of course it's true that men get breast cancer. You know, there are just so many more women. When I would go for chemo treatment, I was the only male patient, you know, every time I went. And of course I'm happy to be a model. Some of you may have seen that today Newsday did a profile on me. And when they called me and I said, you know, is this really necessary? And they said, well, we would like to, you know, profile a man. And I said, okay, I feel a little funny about it. And then she said, and you're not just a man, but you're a handsome man. So then I said, okay, you can do the profile. Of course, it's ironic that I started to work with the hotline and with a lot of your sisters 20 years ago on this issue. Never did I have any idea that I would end up with breast cancer myself. I have always been a public interest lawyer. I started right out of law school working at the local legal services program, which is like legal aid except for civil matters. And so I frequently worked with poor people, victims of domestic violence, people who were sick. And I did frequently work with people that had cancer, and frequently worked with poor women with cancer. And as you know, certainly back then, and I think now as well, poor women, women of color, oftentimes had worse prognosis, died sooner after diagnosis. And so when I became aware of groups like the Hotline and 1 in 9 and other Long Island breast cancer advocacy groups, I reached out to them and I said, let's talk. And frankly, the lessons that I had learned came from the work with HIV and AIDS advocates. And as a legal services attorney, we were dealing a lot with that. As a gay man, I lost many friends 20 years ago. And I always considered myself lucky that I was not among them. You know, who knows how the fates choose what happens to us. And so I understood that life isn't fair, both from losing friends and also from the work that I did every day. You know, I very keenly am aware that life brings everyone troubles of some sort or another. And people have different things to deal with, and this turned out to be one of the things for me to deal with. So we reached out to all of the advocacy groups, and we started to work as to what lessons we could learn from the very successful advocacy for HIV and AIDS groups, and how people had to speak up and fight and perhaps bring on legal challenges. And we began to form this coalition. And I'm very proud to say that we created a pro bono project, and we got 500 attorneys to volunteer to take cases. And back 20 years ago, insurance companies were very different. I know some of you may even still have problems today, but it was far worse 20 years ago. And issues like reconstructive surgery and what they would then call experimental treatments. So things are much easier now, not perfect, but easier. And I'm proud of the role that we as attorneys played in that. And the other thing I'm proud about is I said to the women that I was working with, I want one thing in return. Because frankly, most of the women I was working with were middle class or upper middle class women who had the ability and the time and the voice to speak out. And I said I'd like to make sure that we include poor women and women of color in the work that we're doing. And they were true to their word, and we did include them in all the work that we do. So that's the background of where I'm coming from. And I do have to say that I was just incredibly moved by by the women that I met, who were all brave, which didn't mean that at times they didn't break down, who all had gone through so much, and I just remember their stories. And for me, that's what drives my practice and my job, is the individual stories. I am not in this for the love of the law, although I do love the law. I'm in this for helping people, and those individual stories make a difference. And so when I come to you today about how I got through my diagnosis and treatment, it was because I thought about those women. I thought about the initial people who fought and battled with HIV and AIDS. And then I thought about my clients that I see and have seen for the last 37 years who fight poverty and injustice and racism. And I thought, I can do this. And then as I was going through chemo, I actually didn't miss work because I found it much easier to focus on other people's problems than to focus on my own. Now, I realize that everyone's different and not everyone can do that, and I'm not saying that I'm proud of that, but it just was the way that I was able to get through it. I had a supportive family and friends and coworkers, but really what helped me get through it was focusing on other people's problems. So I don't really have words of wisdom. I was very lucky. I had good medical care. More importantly, I had the ability to afford good medical care because so many people in this country still cannot afford good medical care, and particularly for preventative treatment. And so that's a battle that we still have to fight, and I hope that we all can join together to continue to fight the battle for affordable health care for all Americans. And that's what continues to drive me. I don't know what the future holds for me. I feel great. I feel wonderful. As I said, I believe I have a good support system and a good medical team. But I do know that together we can do much more than we can do individually. And so I'm delighted to be here tonight. A little embarrassed, but delighted. And it's wonderful to see all of your shiny, happy faces. And I wish you all a good celebration.